For 30 years I built an empire from nothing. I thought I was raising a son to inherit a legacy, but I was just raising a parasite. I gave him and his wife everything. The penthouse, the cars, the life they flaunted to the world. Thought they loved me. But people get careless when they think you're stupid. One phone call changed everything. He forgot to hang up and I heard them laughing. I heard his wife ask if I was buying their lies, and I heard my own son reply, "She's way too dumb to notice what's really going on." He was wrong. Noticed. So I silently ended the call. Then I quietly took back what was mine. I canceled their mortgage. I froze every credit card. I rewrote my will. Now the trap is set, and their perfect world is about to come crashing down. They thought I was a fool. They're about to find out I'm a monster of my own making. Follow along to see how I take back my life, one asset at a time. Subscribe for new chapters, like the video if you're ready for some family revenge, and comment below what you would do. The Tuesday afternoon sunlight slanted through the large windows of my Upper East Side apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the silent air. It was a comfortable silence, the kind I had cultivated since handing the reins of my company over and embracing a quieter life. The city's hum was a distant lullaby 7 floors below. On the marble island in my kitchen, a cup of oolong tea had gone cool, forgotten during my weekly call with my son. "The gala committee is thrilled with the donation, Mom." Ethan's voice buzzed through the phone, smooth and confident. "Chloe has been working non-stop. She's already arranged the seating charts. You'll be at our table, of course." "That's wonderful, honey," I said, smiling. "She has such a talent for these things. You two make a formidable team." "We try," he said, a touch of pride in his voice that made my heart swell. "Listen, I've got to run. A meeting with a new investor is starting. But I'll call you tomorrow." "Of course. Give Chloe my love." "Will do. Love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweet." The line didn't click off. There was a faint rustle, the sound of the phone being placed on a hard surface. I was about to hang up, assuming it was a mistake, when I heard a different voice, muffled but clear. 'Twas Chloe. "Is she buying it?" she asked, her tone sharp, stripped of the sugary sweetness she always used with me. Beat of silence. Then my son's laugh. It wasn't the warm, familiar sound I knew. This was something else, a condescending, ugly chuckle. "Completely," Ethan said, the 2 words laced with a chilling amusement. "She's way too dumb to notice what's really going on." The sound vibrated through the phone and into my skull. The air in the room seemed to crystallize, the dust motes freezing in their dance. The word was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. My finger, trembling slightly, moved to the end call button on the screen. I pressed it, and the world went silent. But the silence was different now. It was no longer comfortable. It was the silence of a tomb. I didn't move for a long time. My hand rested on the cold marble of the island, my teacup a distant, forgotten satellite. The city hummed on outside, oblivious. But inside my apartment, inside my head, a single sentence played on a loop. "She's way too dumb to notice." Me. The woman who had started a boutique textile import business with a $5,000 loan and built it into a global design empire. The woman who had negotiated with hardened union bosses in her 20s and outmaneuvered corporate raiders in her 40s. The woman who had single-handedly created the fortune that now paid for Ethan's tailored suits and Chloe's charity lunches. A montage of the past year flickered behind my eyes. Ethan asking me to co-sign a mortgage on a Hamptons starter home, a waterfront property worth more than my first 5 years of company profits. Chloe casually mentioning a power of attorney for healthcare emergencies, insisting it was just a sensible precaution for a woman my age. Their sudden, explosive lifestyle, the cars, the vacations, the art, that I had assumed was the fruit of Ethan's supposed genius at his new investment firm. I had been so proud, so blind. The grief came first, a hot, searing wave that threatened to drown me. This was my son. My boy, whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose nightmares I had chased away. But the grief was quickly followed by something colder, harder. It was an old, familiar feeling, An emotion I hadn't needed to access in years. Rage. Not a hot, screaming rage, but a glacial, silent fury. They thought I was dumb. They thought I was a doddering old woman, a living bank vault to be drained at their leisure. They had mistaken my love for stupidity, my generosity for weakness. In that moment, sitting in the ruins of my most precious relationship, I made a vow. I would not cry. I would not scream. I would not confront them. Confrontation was what they expected. It would give them a chance to lie, to manipulate, to gaslight me. Well, I would give them nothing. I would simply and quietly take back what was mine. That night, for the first time in nearly a decade, I walked into my home office and closed the door. The room was my time capsule, filled with leather-bound ledgers from the early days and framed awards from a life I had packed away. I bypassed them all and sat down at the sleek, minimalist desk, waking the Bloomberg terminal that had lain dormant for too long. My fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory taking over. I was no longer a mother. I was the architect of my own fortune, and I was here to inspect the foundations. I started with the accounts I shared with Ethan, the ones I had set up to give him a comfortable start. Then I moved to the assets I had foolishly allowed him to manage as part of his portfolio. With each click, the picture grew darker. It was so much worse than I had imagined. They hadn't just been siphoning off money for cars and clothes. They had used my name, my credit, and the power of attorney to leverage my blue-chip stocks as collateral for a series of massive high-risk loans. They had funneled the money into a single speculative tech startup, their own company, I realized with a jolt of ice in my veins. They were gambling my entire legacy on a long shot, all while laughing at me behind my back. They weren't just thieves. They were arsonists, ready to burn my entire life's work to the ground for a quick payout. Looking at the raw numbers on the screen, the sheer, breathtaking audacity of their betrayal, I felt the last vestiges of maternal softness evaporate. This wasn't about a lesson. This was about survival. At 7 o'clock the next morning I made 2 calls. The first was to David Chen, my lawyer. He had helped me draft my first business contract 40 years ago and had been by my side for every battle since. He was technically retired, but I knew he kept his license active for emergencies. This qualified. "David," I said when he answered, my voice even. "It's Evelyn. Need you. Bring the files on the trusts and the Hampton property." He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "My office in an hour." The second call was to my private wealth manager at the bank, a sharp woman named Maria who understood that my assets weren't just numbers, but a lifetime. "Maria, I need to schedule a series of transactions for today," I began, my eyes fixed on the financial architecture I'd mapped out on my screen. "We're doing a complete asset reallocation. Effective immediately." I could hear the surprise in her voice, but it was quickly replaced by crisp professionalism. "Of course, Evelyn. What's our first move?" An hour later, I sat across from David in his polished office overlooking Central Park. I laid out the situation calmly, factually, without emotion. I slid a summary I had printed across the desk. He read it, his expression shifting from concern to disbelief, and finally to a quiet fury on my behalf. "That ungrateful little..." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Evelyn, what do you want to do?" I looked him in the eye. "I want to take it all back," I said. "The house, the credit lines, the trust. I want to cut him out so cleanly that by the time he realizes what's happened, his key won't even work in the door." David leaned back, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed a righteous fight. "All right," he said, pulling a legal pad toward him. "Let's get to work." The point of no return came at 2:15 p.m. that afternoon. Sitting in David's office with Maria on a secure speakerphone line, we executed the first, most critical step. "The document is signed and notarized," David confirmed. "The power of attorney granted by Evelyn Reed to Ethan Reed is hereby revoked." "Received," Maria said from the bank. "I'm uploading it to her file now. The system will purge his access credentials within the next 90 seconds. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The first thread snipped from the tapestry of our lives. It was an invisible act, a few lines of code executed in a server farm in Delaware, but it felt as loud as a gunshot. Next, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. The primary advisory account. I want the entire portfolio liquidated and the cash transferred to the new holding trust we created this morning. The one under my sole control. Evelyn, that's a significant portfolio. Liquidating it all at once will have tax implications. Maria began. I'm aware, I cut her off. I'll pay the taxes. I want it done. I want that account balance to be zero by the end of business today. There was a pause. Understood, Maria said. David watched me, his expression unreadable. Are you sure, Evelyn? I thought of my son's laughter. I thought of the word dumb. I looked at the confirmation prompt on the tablet David passed to me. It was the final authorization for the transfer. A digital severance. A final, irreversible step. I thought of Ethan as a little boy, holding my hand as we crossed the street. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, pushing the memory away. He had killed that boy. I was just burying the body. My finger tapped the screen. It's done, I whispered. The war had begun. And the enemy had no idea. The following day was a blur of calculated, sterile transactions. I sat at my dining room table, not my desk, with my laptop open and a headset on. It felt less like business and more like a military operation, and this was my command center. My first call was to the Executive Services Division of American Express. Good morning, this is Evelyn Reed, primary account holder for the Centurion card ending in 8008, I said, my voice as placid as a frozen lake. I need to report several supplementary cards as compromised. Compromised, Mrs. Reed. As in stolen? The agent asked, his voice alert with concern. You could say that, I replied coolly. The cards are in the possession of Ethan Reed and Chloe Reed. Please cancel their cards immediately. And while you're at it, please do the same for all other credit lines associated with my accounts under their names. The Visa, the Neiman Marcus card, all of them. Terminate them. There was a flurry of typing. I see. And the charges from the past month. There's a significant balance. A jeweler in Aspen, a hotel in St. Bart's. Flag every charge over $500 for review. I did not authorize them. Very good, Mrs. Reed. We've placed an immediate freeze. The supplementary cards are now inactive. I pictured it vividly. Chloe at a boutique on Madison Avenue, handing over the sleek black metal card, only to be met with a polite, firm rejection. The thought brought me a grim, satisfying chill. I thanked the agent and hung up. One lifeline severed. Many more to go. The crown jewel of their deceit was the house in the Hamptons. They called it their house. They hosted parties there, posting photos of themselves by the infinity pool, hashtagging their bliss for all the world to see. But I knew the truth. I had paid the $3 million down payment. My name was on the deed, and more importantly, my signature was the primary guarantee on the mortgage. They were merely glorified tenants living on my dime. At noon, David and I conferenced in the vice president of the private mortgage division at the bank. Mr. Henderson, I began, wasting no time on pleasantries. I'm calling about the mortgage on the property at 142 Dune Road. I want to pay off the remaining balance. There was a stunned silence. The entire balance, Mrs. Reed? That's just over $4 million. I am aware of the amount, I said. I have the liquidity. Please prepare the paperwork for a wire transfer from my primary investment account. David interjected smoothly. We will also be filing a quitclaim deed to have Ethan Reed and Chloe Reed removed from the title. As Mrs. Reed is the primary guarantor and is satisfying the loan in its entirety, we expect this to be a smooth process. This is highly unusual, Henderson stammered. These are unusual circumstances, I replied, my tone leaving no room for argument. Please send the final payoff amount and wiring instructions to my attorney's office within the hour. I hung up, imagining the frantic, hushed conversations now happening at the bank. Let them talk. I pictured the pristine white walls of that house, the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto the Atlantic. It was a beautiful home. My home. And I was taking it back. That afternoon I met David back at his office. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and finality. On the polished mahogany table between us lay a thick stack of documents. My last will and testament, and the charter for the Reed Family Trust. "Are you certain about this, Evelyn?" David asked, his pen poised over the first page. "This is a profound step. Cutting a child out of a will." "He made his choice," I said, my voice devoid of any quiver. "He chose to see me as an obstacle, a fool to be fleeced. The future I planned for him was built on a foundation of mutual love and respect. He dynamited that foundation. I am simply clearing the rubble." One by one I signed the documents. With a stroke of my pen, I removed Ethan as the executor of my will, replacing him with David. I redirected the vast majority of my estate, which had been destined for the Reed Family Trust he would one day control, into a new charitable foundation I had named after my own parents. The Evelyn and Arthur Vance Foundation. A legacy of my own making once again. "What about Ethan?" David asked softly. "Do we remove him entirely?" I thought for a moment. An outright omission could give him grounds to contest the will, to claim I was not of sound mind. "No," I said. "Add a clause. To my son Ethan Reed, for whom I once held the highest hopes, I bequeath the sum of $1. David looked up at me, his eyes wide. It was a brutal, final insult. A legal slap in the face that would be read out loud. A public declaration that he was not forgotten, but intentionally and deliberately cast out. It was perfect. That night, back in my silent apartment, I performed the final cleansing. I went through my digital life, a place where our family was intricately woven together. I removed Chloe from the shared family photo album, deleting years of her smiling, predatory face from my history. I changed the passwords on the streaming services, the flight accounts, the hotel loyalty programs. It was tedious, methodical work. Then, I came across a file I hadn't opened in years. It was a folder of old home movies, digitized from crumbling VHS tapes. My cursor hovered over one labeled Ethan's 10th birthday. On impulse I clicked. My son's face, chubby and bright with joy, filled the screen. He was blowing out the candles on a superhero-themed cake. His eyes squeezed shut in concentration. He looked so small, so innocent. A wave of nausea and profound loss washed over me. This was the boy I had raised. This was the child I loved beyond measure. What was I doing? Had I become a monster? My finger went to the trackpad, ready to close the file, to call David, to stop everything. This was too cruel. He was still my son. And then I heard it, a ghost on the videotape. My own voice from 2 decades ago, laughing. "Make a wish, sweetheart." The audio triggered the memory of that other sound. Ethan's cold, condescending laughter on the phone. The image of the innocent boy on the screen dissolved, replaced by the face of a man who thought his own mother was a fool. My resolve hardened like steel. The pain didn't vanish, but it was transformed into fuel. I closed the video file, dragged the entire folder to the trash, and emptied it. The ghost was exorcised. By Wednesday afternoon it was done. Every account was secured. Every asset was back under my solitary control. Every tie that bound them to my fortune had been systematically and silently severed. David had the final documents ready. The official notice from the mortgage company confirming the loan satisfaction and transfer of ownership, and a formal letter from his law firm stating that their right to occupy the Hamptons property was terminated. They would have 30 days to remove their personal belongings. When should I send them? David asked over the phone. I looked at the calendar. Today was Wednesday. They had likely just endured the first small humiliation of a declined card. The panic wouldn't have set in yet. It would be a slow burn. I wanted them to feel the confusion, to scramble in the dark for a few days, to exhaust every other possibility before the terrible truth dawned on them. Hold them until Friday, I said. End of business day. Hung up the phone. My apartment was quiet. My work was finished. I poured myself a glass of Chardonnay, walked over to the large window, and looked out at the city I had conquered once before. The trap was set. The silent siege was complete. I had built a 3-day buffer of silence between my actions and their consequences. Now all I had to do was wait for my phone to ring. I didn't have to be there to see it happen. I could picture it perfectly. On Wednesday night, Ethan and Chloe were at Per Se, a temple of haute cuisine with a view of Columbus Circle, a place where the bill arrives like a leather-bound death sentence. They were wooing a potential investor for their tech venture, a man whose wealth was old and discerning. The night would have been a performance of casual opulence. The talk of disruptive technology, the perfectly paired wines, the easy laughter. Then the check would arrive. Ethan, ever the magnanimous host, would produce his black Amex Centurion card. My card. I imagined the waiter returning to the table, his expression a mask of professional regret. "I'm very sorry, sir, but the card has been declined." Ethan's laugh would be a little too loud. "That's absurd. Run it again." The waiter would return again, his face tighter this time. "My apologies, sir. It has been declined a second time." I could feel their second-hand embarrassment from my apartment 20 blocks away. The smooth confidence would curdle into annoyance. Chloe, trying to save face, would offer her own visa, the supplementary card I had also cancelled. Declined. The investor's polite smile would become fixed, his eyes taking on a new, calculating glint. The evening's performance would end not with a handshake, but with a humiliating scramble to pay with a debit card, a tool for commoners. The deal, I knew, would be dead before they even stepped into the elevator. It was the first pebble in the avalanche. The panic would have begun in earnest on Thursday morning. Waking in their sterile, overpriced rental apartment, the lease for which, I recalled with a grim smile, was up next month, they would have started making calls. I imagined Ethan on the phone with the bank, his voice shifting from imperious to irritated to outright alarmed. "What do you mean the line of credit has been closed?" "By whom?" "By the primary account holder." "That's impossible, my mother wouldn't." Chloe would be at her laptop, her perfectly manicured fingers clicking furiously. "Ethan, the joint savings account is empty. The money's gone. The entire balance from the portfolio liquidation. It's just gone." Their first thoughts would not be of me. Their arrogance wouldn't allow it. They would assume it was a catastrophic bank error, a cyber attack, anything but an act of will by the dumb woman they'd been laughing about. They would spend the entire day caught in a vortex of automated phone menus and unhelpful bank representatives, their world shrinking with every access denied message. They were pilots discovering their controls were unresponsive, still flying on momentum but knowing, with a sickening certainty, that the ground was rushing up to meet them. The kill shot arrived at 4:55 p.m. on Friday. David, ever a man of precision, sent the email exactly as I had instructed. They would have been together, probably deep in a frantic, paranoid conversation about their dwindling options. Then, a notification would chime on Ethan's phone. An email from an unknown law firm. The subject line would stop his heart. Notice of ownership transfer and termination of occupancy for the property at 142 Dune Road, Bridgehampton, New York. He would open it, his hands shaking. He would see the cold legal jargon. Pursuant to the satisfaction of the outstanding mortgage by the primary guarantor, Evelyn Reed, all rights of title are hereby consolidated under her sole ownership. All previous occupancy permissions are terminated. You are required to vacate the premises within 30 days. Attached would be a PDF of the newly filed deed. My name and my name alone was on it. That would be the moment. The moment the fog of confusion would be blasted away by the blinding light of the truth. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a bank error. It was her. His quiet, doting, dumb mother had, with a stroke of a pen from an office he didn't even know she still used, seized their castle and rendered them homeless. The silence from my end for the past 3 days would suddenly seem not neglectful, but predatory. The ensuing argument must have been spectacular. The facade of the united, ambitious power couple would have been incinerated on the spot. How could you let this happen? Chloe's shriek would echo off the apartment's bare white walls. You said you had her handled. You said she was completely out of touch. Me. Ethan would have shot back, his voice raw with panic and rage. You're the one who was always pushing for more. We need the house, Ethan. Ask her for the credit line, Ethan. You got greedy. You underestimated her. I underestimated her. You're her son. You told me she was a fool. The accusations would fly, each one designed to wound, to shift the crushing weight of the blame onto the other. All their shared ambitions, their whispered flatteries, their secret jokes, all of it was built on the foundation of my money. With that foundation ripped out from under them, they were revealed to be nothing more than two greedy strangers in a room, turning on each other like cornered rats. Their love story was a business arrangement, and business, they were discovering, was very, very bad. My phone remained silent all weekend. It was a conscious choice on their part, I'm sure. A last, desperate attempt to maintain a shred of dignity, to solve the problem themselves. But by Monday morning, with no money, no credit, and an eviction notice ticking like a bomb, their pride had been exhausted. It started at 9:01 a.m. Call from Ethan. I watched his picture flash on the screen and let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification of a new message appeared. Then another call. Then a call from Chloe. I ignored them all. For the next hour, my phone buzzed incessantly. They were desperate, frantic, losing control. Finally, at 10:30 a.m., I decided it was time. I let Ethan's next call ring 3 times, then answered. Hello, I said, my voice perfectly calm, as if I were expecting a call from the grocer. Mom. Ethan's voice was a choked, ragged thing I barely recognized. Mom, what the hell is happening? Our accounts are frozen, the cards are shut off. We got an email from a lawyer about the house. Yes, I interrupted him softly. I know. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. He had been expecting denials, confusion, a shared sense of victimhood. He was not prepared for a calm confession. You did this, he stammered, the disbelief palpable. Yes, Ethan, I said, a universe of cold disappointment in my voice. I did. I think it's time we had a talk. They arrived at my apartment that afternoon looking like shipwreck survivors. Ethan's expensive suit was rumpled, his face pale and drawn. Chloe, usually a vision of curated perfection, was stripped of her armor. Her makeup was blotchy, her eyes wide with a fear she couldn't conceal. They stood in my doorway, radiating a frantic energy that felt like a pollutant in my quiet space. Mom, you have to fix this, Ethan began, his voice cracking as he stepped inside. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it. This has to stop. Chloe found a sliver of her old fire. What you've done is completely insane, Evelyn. We could sue you for. Sue me for what? I asked, my voice cutting through her tirade like glass. I closed the door softly behind them. For paying off a mortgage that was in my name. For canceling credit cards that I pay for. Please sit down. I gestured to the 2 stiff-backed chairs opposite the sofa where I sat. It was a deliberate arrangement. This was not a family gathering. It was an audit. They hesitated, then sank into the chairs, their anger deflating into uncertainty. There's no point in yelling, I said, my hands resting calmly in my lap. Let me show you what I know. From the rosewood box on the coffee table, I retrieved a slim, leather-bound folder. I opened it and placed the first document on the table for them to see. It was a copy of the power of attorney application Chloe had convinced me to sign. You told me this was for medical emergencies, I said, my gaze fixed on her. But you used it to access my business accounts. I added the next document to the pile. The application for the massive loan they had taken out against my portfolio. I pointed to the bottom. My signature is required here. I never saw this document. It is, therefore, a forgery. I continued, my voice even and methodical, laying out each piece of evidence. Printed bank statements showing the money transfers to their shell corporation. A timeline I had compiled, cross-referencing their lavish purchases with the dates of their illegal withdrawals. A prospectus for their doomed tech venture, built entirely on my stolen capital. With each new page, the color drained further from their faces. Their anger was replaced by a primal, animal fear. This wasn't a hysterical mother throwing a tantrum. This was a prosecutor laying out an airtight case. They weren't just facing financial ruin. They were facing prison. They finally understood. I wasn't dumb. I had just been quiet. Tepat pukul delapan malam, lampu ballroom meredap. Music Syria berenti. Digantikan ola alunan musik yang mega. Siorang pembawa akara dengan setilan jes berkelawan naik kuatas panggung. Selamat malam para hadirin sekalian. Selamat datang di perayaan ulang tahun kelima feral adatama. Tepik tanggon membahana. Karana ikut berdepak tanggon tersenyum. MC melanjutkan. Dan tentu saja tidak akan ada pesta tanpa bintang utama kita. Mari kita panggil kuatas panggung. Si jagoan Kessel, feral, bersama ibundanya yang cantik, Vina Larasati. Vina, dengan senyum paling mempesona yang pernah karana lihat. Mengganding feral naik kuatas panggung. Feral tampak malu-malu dalam setilan jas meninya. Mereka melambaikan tangan kepada para timu. Tapi tunggu dulu, kata MC dengan nada dramatis. Malam ini ada kejutan yang sangat spesial. Sebuah persembahan dari sosok yang paling menginspirasi dalam hidup feral. Dan sekarang untuk memberikan kejutan termanis untuk putranya, mari kita sambut. Sosok ayah yang luar biasa. Sebuah drumroll dimainkan. Lampu sorot bergerak menyapu keramunan. Menciptakan ketegangan. Kirana mengkandangkan tubuhnya ke depan. Penasaran ingin melihat wajah suami Vina untuk pertama kalinya. Lampu sorot berhenti. Menyurat sosok pria jangkung yang tadi ia lihat. Pria itu melangkah keluar dari keramangan. Berjalan dengan pakaian diri menuju panggung. Waktu sila berhenti bagi Kirana. Dara serasa surat dari wajahnya. Udara di paru-parunya lenyap. Kiu bukan orang asing. Setilan jas mahal itu poster tubuh yang familiar. Cara ia berjalan. Q Marco. Suaminya. Dunia Kirana miring pada porosnya. Jelas just di tangannya terlipas. Jatuh ke karpet tebal tanpa suara. Tepik tangan Maria di sekelilingnya terdengar seperti deru ombak dari kejauhan. Marco naik ke panggung tersenyum, lalu memeluk feral dengan erat dan mencium keningnya. Ia berdiri di samping Vina. Satu tangannya melingkari pinggang wanita itu dengan posif. Mereka tampak seperti keluarga yang sempurna. Keluarga yang fotonya dipajang di majalah. Sila itu bilam kakap. Marco mengambil mikrofon dari matanya yang tajam menyapu keramunan. Dan kemudian mata itu berhenti. Mata itu menemukannya. Mata itu mengganti pandangannya. Tidak ada rasa kaget di sana. Tidak ada rasa bersalah. Yang ada hanyalah kilatan dinjin, sebuah kepwesan yang kejam. Di wajahnya terakar senyum tipis yang penuh kemenangan. Vina di sampingnya, juga menatap lurus ke arah Kirana, senyumnya sama angkunya. Dalam sepersekian detik yang terasa seperti keabadian. Semua kepingan puzzle jatuh ke tempatnya dengan bunyi yang memekakan telinga. Desakan Marco agar ia datang. Telepon Vina yang penuh rekan manis. Perjalanan bisnis palsu. Telepon penuh perhatian saat tiba di hotel. Ini bukan kecelakaan. Ini bukan rahasia yang terbongkar tanpa sengaja. Ini adalah sebuah panggung sandiwara. Sebuah eksekusi publik. Sebuah pertunjukan yang dirancang dengan cermat dan kejam. Dan Kirana sadar. Dengan razan jari yang membekukan darah di nadinya. Bahwa ia bukanlah TMU. Ia adalah satu-satunya penonton yang menjadi target dari semua ini. I raised a hand, and they both fell silent. There will be no criminal charges, I said. The relief that washed over their faces was immediate and pathetic. On one condition. I slid another document across the table. It was a legally binding agreement drafted by David. This document states that you both agree to renounce any and all future claims to my estate. You will agree to a permanent restraining order, forbidding you from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of any of my properties. You will disappear from my life permanently. Ethan stared at the paper. You're disowning me. You disowned me the moment you laughed about my intelligence after fleecing me, I replied, my voice hard. This is just the paperwork. I pushed a small envelope across the table. In that envelope, you will find a cashier's check for $50,000. It is the last money you will ever receive from me. Consider it severance. There are also 2 one-way, coach-class airline tickets to anywhere you want to go within the continental United States. You have 30 days to vacate the apartment you are in before the funds for the lease are cut off. You will sign the agreement, take the money, and you will start over. A life entirely of your own making. Isn't that what you wanted? The finality of it hung in the air. This wasn't just punishment. It was an erasure. They looked at each other, then at the papers, and knew they had no other choice. With trembling hands, they each took the pen and signed away their future. 3 months later, the last of the city smog seemed to have been washed from my lungs by the clean, salt-laced air of the Hamptons. I had sold the apartment in the city. The silence there had become too loud, each room echoing with ghosts. Here in the house I had taken back, the silence was peaceful, punctuated only by the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. I didn't know where they had gone. I had instructed David to handle the final details, and I had never asked. San Diego maybe, or Portland. Someplace far away where the name Reed meant nothing. The pain of losing a son was not a simple thing. It was an ache that I knew would live in my bones forever. But woven through the pain was a profound sense of peace. I had faced the ugliest betrayal of my life not with hysterics, but with the cold, clear-eyed strength I had forgotten I possessed. I had reclaimed more than just my fortune. I had reclaimed myself. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. It wasn't family. It was the director of the new Evelyn and Arthur Vance Foundation. "Good morning, Evelyn," she said, her voice bright with purpose. "The first round of scholarship applications is ready for your review." I looked out at the endless blue horizon, at the new day dawning over the water. "I'll be right there," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in a long time. My future was my own again, and it was just beginning. And so, my empire is secure, and my house is quiet again. The price was my son, but the reward was my soul. I took back everything they stole from me. My money, my dignity, and my peace. They got the life they deserved, and I got the one I had earned. But now I have to ask you, was I right? Comment below with, "No mercy," if you believe I did the right thing by cutting them out completely. Or comment with, "1 chance," if you would have left the door open for an apology, even a sliver. I'm dying to know what you would have done. Let me know your verdict on my story in the comments.